He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Thanks for joining us, folks. While you're listening to this, the weather where you are is probably better than the weather where Phil is right now. I can say that confidently because where Phil is right now, the weather is pretty much as bad as it gets. This
Coming to
is
you
the
from live from Hurricane Central this week.
so stay off my operating table, Dr. Philip Ovadia, and we have a guest today that we've never talked to anyone like this. Somebody who was on The Biggest Loser. And Phil, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I was going to say, real excited to have this conversation with Adrian Gledhill. Adrian, I have spoken many times about all of the things that I tried to do to lose weight. And as much as I think I had done everything I could to try and lose weight, Adrian has done probably two things we're going to talk about that I did not do to try and lose weight. One of them being on the Biggest Loser show. So real excited to hear about her weight loss journey and ultimately how she came now to, I would say, conquer her battle with obesity finally after so many failed attempts. Why don't you start maybe by just giving us some of your background, Adrian, and maybe bring us up to the point of how you got to be on The Biggest Loser.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Hopefully, we can keep some more people off the operating table. As heard so many people say that they relate to this story, even though they've never been on The Biggest Loser. I've always been overweight. As a kid, I grew up in a moldy old home. And so from ages 0 to 10, I'm in this moldy home and I'm struggling with weight. We're eating noodles, we have bread, and we have potatoes at every single meal. And I'm never full. As a child, I never had that feeling of full. And I was feeling so guilty about it because as a chubby child, I'm being told that I'm gluttonous and I eat too much. So it's when you combine the two, it just really builds a bad relationship inside your heart between your body and your food relationship. I get it. We actually build a new home. And after moving into the new home, I stop having as bad of weight issues. And I also start working out. So I'm in all the sports. I'm in soccer and cross country skiing and golf and track and field. And I'm staying so busy that I slimmed down quite a bit. But still, I was like 165 in high school. And in 2002 or 1998, that was still considered big. These days, I don't know. But back then, I was still one of the bigger kids, but I was doing good until I went to college. Again, staying in those moldy old, dorms. I just gained like 60 pounds. Everybody else gained 15. I gained 60. And yes, I was eating at the dorm. And yes, there was some alcoholic beverages added. And also I had stopped movement. I wasn't playing all the sports anymore and I was just studying all the time and having some of those alcoholic beverages. And I'm from Minnesota, Wisconsin. That's a big thing here. So I start struggling. And that's when the first summer I go home, we try the Atkins diet. That was my first time with a diet. And I lost some weight. I actually had some success. I think I lost like 40 of my 60 pounds or something in the 3 months. But I go back to college, more moldy dorms, and I gain it all back. And that's when my stepmom jokes and says, we should apply for The Biggest Loser. And I'd never seen the show before, but I kind of was like, wow, I could finally not be big. And so I applied. And much to my surprise, I got picked.
Yeah, very interesting to hear about this. What was that application process like, and what did you have to do to get selected to be on the show?
This is going to be a little weird to, our newer, younger people, but there weren't smartphones and there was no CapCut. There was barely even Facebook back then. So I borrowed some old VHS tape recorder from someone. You had to have it on your shoulder and you had to have it plugged in. And we filmed different things. And then there was no way to really edit. So we just filmed the TV to move the different segments around. So it's like the most low quality thing you've ever seen. But that to me just goes to show, because some people had access to better things. It just goes to show I really feel like I was meant to have this experience because the quality was horrendous. But the content was me telling my story of struggling with weight my whole life, me in a bikini doing snow angels. And so that's how I got picked.
All right. So how old were you when you went on the show?
22. So I was one of the youngest
Wow.
contestants.
Okay. And how much did you weigh, I guess, pre-show or when the show started?
About 230 pounds. So I was also one of the smaller contestants they'd ever brought on.
Okay. All right.
Wow.
And yeah, tell us what it was like being on the show. I'm sure many people in watching and listening to this will have seen the show. I suspect our audience is of that age demographic for the most part, but maybe a little bit behind the scenes. Tell us what your experience was like on the show, what it was like going through the Biggest Loser, program, their weight loss program.
So I got to experience two different things. I actually got sent home the first day, and there was a bunch of us that were sent home. Whoever lost most weight at home got to come back on. So the at-home program was with a doctor, a nutritionist, and a psychologist. So I would call this part of it pretty much the standard American diet. Like you go to the doctor and they will often tell you this was a really good plan, I guess. So we had a lot of support. We had weekly calls. We had a DEXA scan done. We did the bod pod. So they knew our body composition. They knew our heart health. They ran tons of blood tests. There was like a whole week of testing done with a doctor. And this happens for all contestants, a lot of testing to ensure that your heart and your body can manage the stress that's about to. They told me do 2 workouts a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, work out 6 days a week, even if you're sick. There was little tiny tidbits like drink cold beverages and eat cold food because that helps. Your body has to burn energy to warm itself back up. In between my 2 workouts, walk all day long. So that was the at-home portion. I did end up being the biggest loser at home. So I got to come back onto the show, and that's when I found out what's going on there. And people will be shocked to find that it wasn't this amazing, you picture it being a weight loss clinic. You picture people holding your hand, helping you cook, helping you work out, telling you what to do every day, ensuring that you're all right, giving you counseling. That's not the show at all. Like the trainers were only there really when the cameras were there. They're celebrities. So they'd be there a couple times a week. They were there to film the last chance workout. They were there to help with the competitions. So people were on their own. And if you tell people, hey, we'll give you $250,000 to lose the most weight, and you're left alone, what do you think is happening? Very disordered things. Eat as little as possible and exercise 13 hours a day. That's honestly what was happening. And by the time I got there, everybody had an injury. Myself and my partner were the only people without injuries. And when you watch TV, they'll be like, oh, look at them making that excuse for an injury. No, they were actually injured. Like they actually had bursitis. And there was no doctor really. There was a guy that would tape us up, but there was no actually doctor on set. So when I couldn't sleep at night at all, I stayed up all night long and my body was like twitching. There was nobody there to run a blood test or anything or say, hey, you're magnesium deficient. You just were on your own. It was a pressure cooker too. You're extinguishing all these fat cells, which is releasing all those toxins and all those hormones into your blood. Meanwhile, there's cameras in every corner of the building following you around. And meanwhile, you're playing this social game so you don't get kicked off for this dream of getting your dream body and winning that money. And so you can imagine why I cried the whole time.
Good Lord.
And so did so many other people.
Yeah, I would certainly think so. And again, the sort of philosophy, behind the show was basically just taking calories in, calories out to the extreme. As I recall, there really wasn't any discussion about food quality, and there's certainly, I'm trying to remember, but I remember much about, macros and, food quality. I think, it was just sort of calories in, calories out to the extreme.
It was very 3 meals a day. Okay, this was the plan from my doctor before I got on the show. They really got very little nutritional advice. They were basically saying, okay, I get to eat 6 chips a day because that fits in my calories in, calories out. It wasn't, hey, let's focus on protein. Let's focus on healthy fats. It wasn't like that. But my guy, because I had the at-home piece, he told me, what we're told at the doctor's office, which is eat balanced and eat 3 meals a day and 2 snacks. So I was breaking my 1,200 calories up into 3 meals and 2 snacks. Now, when Jillian was on, she was telling her contestants to eat less than 800 calories a day, her women.
God.
And then work out 13 hours a day. And I saw a recent interview where she said that none of her contestants lost muscle.
I find that very hard to believe. And, there was a follow-up study done on Biggest Loser contestants that basically showed that the vast majority of them, regained the weight and their metabolism was just wrecked. Their basal metabolic rates were just had crashed through the floor. They had thyroid issues and all of this.
Why did their basal metabolic rates crash? What caused that?
Just lack of, the calorie in restriction, I think, was so extreme. And
the body into starvation mode.
Yeah, put the body basically into starvation and the low thyroid, because again, they just weren't getting anywhere near, the basics you need. And, especially while working out to that level. So what were your results from the show, Adrian? How much did you lose?
So I lost 66 pounds, but between even the show and the finale, because there's like a 4-month period or something like that, it's quite a bit of time, I actually gained weight. I might have been like the only person to do this. I also began really struggling with alcohol. And I'd like to say I've been sober for 11 years. So that's not an issue anymore, but it did become an issue. And I've heard from other contestants, it became an issue for them too. I am not alone. But for a long time, I thought I was alone. And so as the show ends, I gain 100 pounds.
Oh my Lord.
So
you lost 60 and then gained 100.
If you can imagine the shame. And that's why you're not going to have a ton of people coming out here talking, because you just blame yourself. The whole country says all you have to do is eat less. Obviously, you just became a pig again and you didn't work on your emotional issues. And it's way deeper than that, I found. It's metabolic, it's hormonal. There's way more to this than just continue to starve yourself forever.
You clearly don't weigh 250 pounds right now. And you probably wouldn't be on the show if you did.
I'd still be hiding.
So let's talk about, from that point, you've gained 100 pounds. You're embarrassed. You're feeling shame. You think it's your fault. And there's a lot of folks in America who are relating to that right now. And here you are today. So give us the highlights. How'd you get from there to here?
I ended up having 2 pregnancies, and the second pregnancy, I got preeclampsia. And with that, I ended up gaining 60 pounds of water. So I stopped weighing myself at 330 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
After that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I absolutely have to go Biggest Loser style. I got to do this again. And so after giving birth, like pretty quickly after giving birth, I started running half marathons with my big, huge body and restricting, apportioning out all my food, doing the exact Biggest Loser plan again. And I was able to lose 100 pounds. So 330, now we're at 230. But the minute that I hit 230, my weight started going back up again, despite me working so hard. And that's when I was like, I'm obviously broken. And so I reached out to some fellow Biggest Losers who had lost their weight again. And I asked them, what are you guys doing? And they said, gastric bypass. So that's when I looked into it and they said, this is the #1 most successful way to finally get that weight off and keep it off. So I had the surgery. But that's not why I am where I am today.
Yeah, but let's go into that a little bit. And you're now late 20s?
Oh, thank you. I'm 40.
No, I mean when you had the gastric bypass.
Yes, I'm 29.
Okay, yeah. And this is something we haven't talked a whole lot about on the show. I think we've brought it up some, but explain, what is gastric bypass surgery?
It's when they cut your stomach into a little pouch, I don't know, this big, I think. And then they take the rest of your stomach and part of your intestine. What is it? 46 centimeters? It's a bunch of intestine. And they take the rest of your stomach and the intestine and they attach it farther down the intestine. And then they bring the other piece of the intestine up to your little tiny pouch. So now I can only eat what fits in my pouch. And I've skipped a huge portion of my intestine that would be absorbing nutrients. But they cast it as you'll absorb less calories, which turns out maybe you do for the first year, but after that, no, now you're just not absorbing nutrients.
Yeah, to go into that a little bit. So there are actually a bunch of different types of weight loss surgery. It sounds like you had what's called a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, fancy medical name. But like you said, they basically reduce your stomach pouch down in size so that you can't eat a lot at once. And then they literally, the food, instead of going into the first part of the small intestines, they basically bypass that. So now your food is entering further down in the intestinal tract. And that, like you said, has the effect of reducing the absorption of that food. And yes, you reduce the absorption of calories, but the downside is you also reduce the absorption of nutrients. And, gastric bypass has been shown to, be successful in reducing obesity, in reducing diabetes in some cases, but over the long run, it also has its own issues that develop. You have the gastric bypass surgery, and how'd you do with that? How'd you do after that?
I again got down to my biggest loser weight for about 5 minutes. But there was a problem. With my 100-pound weight loss, I had already killed my metabolism. So I was going into this surgery already in starvation mode. And so losing weight with the surgery was like so hard. And the second I got down to the 160s, I bounced right back up to the 180s. Like I immediately started going back up. And I'm going to the doctor and I'm like, listen, I'm eating 800 calories. I'm running half marathons. I'm working out 5 days a week. This doesn't make any sense. And they just said, maybe you're not tracking right, or maybe you're eating too much sugar. And I'm like, I eat no sugar. And they were like, and they never really looked into my thyroid, my hormones, my autoimmune conditions. Those things actually should have been looked at prior to even giving me surgery, but it was kind of glossed over. So now, after struggling still, now we've got the added pieces of anemia. Is it the B vitamins that are difficult to absorb now? It's difficult to absorb protein, and I'm having chronic hypoglycemia. And maybe you can explain this. The weird part is I'm eating green beans and chicken and I'm still having hypoglycemia. Honestly, it was stress induced as well as food induced, even though I'm eating so low carb. And so it was super weird. So the next 10 years is me battling this hypoglycemia. I can't leave my house because my blood sugar might drop and I might pass out. There was one time I was driving and I knew, like, it hits you fast. It doesn't give you any warming signals. It's like a minute. This is coming and it's dropping quick. And I remember I had enough time to call my parents, tell my something weird was happening. I pulled over. I passed out. They came to my car. I mean, the hypoglycemia was debilitating. So I've been low carb ever since then. So 29. So I was low carb for 10 years before coming to where we are today. And even then, with the low carb and the surgery, I'm still frustrated with my weight. I have no energy. I'm anemic. I'm having fertility issues. I'm having brain issues. I'm having hormonal issues. So that's how we get to where we are today.
Well, no,
Okay,
you did
so
not. You did not close the gap here. You left us at what sounds like a horrible place. You clearly are not fat, and you're clearly not lacking in energy, and you appear to be the very picture of health. So, close the gap here for us.
So I have my final pregnancy, and at the end, I caught the bad virus. And that caused me to get into long haulers. And so
Into
I'm
what?
I'm having long haulers. I don't want to say the other word.
Oh,
you
okay.
could,
It rhymes with rovid.
Okay.
yeah, it's all right. We mostly stay out of trouble, but every once in a while we might get flagged. But all right, so pregnancy, COVID, long COVID, and this is all in the context of. I just wanted to kind of clarify what you said though. So you had the gastric bypass, and so you went low carb after you had gastric bypass. And when you say low carb at that context, is it just because you're not eating a lot anyway? So you're sort of low carb, or were you really intentionally avoiding carbs and only, kind of doing a low carb approach after your gastric bypass surgery?
Immediately after surgery, I followed their diet, which involves carbs, but I was having this hypoglycemia. And I went in and they told me, take the little sugar pills and just eat all the time. That will keep your blood sugar up. And they would tell me even to eat sugar to keep my blood sugar up. But what would happen is my blood sugar would immediately dive. I would, let's say my blood sugar dived. I eat a piece of candy, it comes up, I feel better for about 10 minutes, and then I dive even worse. And so I quickly figured out I couldn't have any sugar at all. So then next thing was cutting out the grains. When that didn't cure the hypoglycemia, then I cut out the dairy. When that didn't cure the hypoglycemia, then I cut out the starchy vegetables. When that didn't work, I just kept cutting because I could not live with this hypoglycemia. So at the end, I was literally down to green beans and meat and lettuce. And I didn't know much about seed oils yet. So I get the bad virus and now I'm debilitated. Like, it was bad enough to have the hypoglycemia, bad enough to have anemia, but you pile some long haulers on there and I can't function. I can't drive. My arms and legs were going numb. Every time I ate, I was getting sick. Every time I couldn't eat out at all. Eating out would make me terribly sick. My neck would go numb. I think that had I gone to the wrong doctor, they may even have diagnosed me with MS because I was going numb so often. And I know I've had a brain scan now. I know that they may have looked at that and said, oof, but there's no cure for that. And so my dad had gone no grains, no sugar with Vinny. And he said, hey, his co host went carnivore and it really helped her autoimmune. And with nobody seemed to have an answer for why my adrenals were dead and my thyroid was dead. And I've got all these antibodies and they didn't seem to have what could we do about it. So in desperation, I said, okay, I'm going to go carnivore. So I immediately started feeling better when I went carnivore. I got to say, it was a little rough at first because as a gastric bypass patient, it was difficult to eat meat. So I was eating way more plants than I would say I probably should have been because those just go through the body easier.
Right.
So I switched to this meat and I immediately start feeling better. But then we had to dig a little bit deeper. Meat and lifting weights hasn't been the only ticket. I really had to go into the chronic inflammatory response syndrome route.
Okay, you just introduced a phrase that I don't think I've ever heard on the show. Chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Bill, would you give us the medical side and then Adrian can tell us what that's
Yeah,
like
sure
to live
thing.
with
I
that.
mean, this is one example where the medical term does sort of explain what it is, right? It's a chronic inflammatory response. And I think the biggest kind of medical difficulties around it, right, are first of all, just properly diagnosing that because it's one of these things that gets diagnosed as lots of other things, and then figuring out what the inflammatory response is to, right? Because it's one thing to try and treat the inflammation, which becomes sort of the focus, I think, oftentimes for the medical system, try and suppress the immune system, try and suppress inflammation, but getting to the root cause and figuring out what's causing the inflammation, the inflammatory response really becomes important.
Can we talk about how did I get this?
Yeah, definitely.
That's why we're here.
I grew up in a moldy old house. And then I was in moldy dorms. And those didn't necessarily cause it, they just started it. Then I was in a very abusive marriage, and that's a lot of stress
A
on
lot of
your
stress.
entire nervous system. And then I had a really bad divorce, and that's bad on your nervous system. And then I slipped on the ice and I hit my head. And it was such a bad head injury that I actually left my body and came back. So, pretty bad head injury. I'm probably missing some, but the final nail on the coffin was the bad virus. And so now we're working on, once you get it, now you're sensitive to things maybe you weren't super sensitive to before. So now we're working on ensuring I have clean air and watching toxin exposure and pulling it out of me.
Yeah, and I would even throw in probably, playing, wreaking havoc on your metabolic system, right? Losing weight,
Yes.
gaining weight, losing weight, the thyroid, the adrenal, all of this, I think probably plays into it. The theory behind this SIRS response is that, after your immune system gets primed enough and it becomes sort of hyper because it's just sort of under constant attack. And then at some point, it just, the original stimulus can be gone, maybe a virus or whatever it is, but your body keeps reacting like it's still around. And that's when it becomes this chronic inflammatory response without even necessarily having the trigger for it anymore. Mm-hmm. But very interesting to hear. So you go carnivore, and tell us, like, how quickly did you start to notice improvements in some of this stuff?
Oh, the thing is, the thing that I felt immediate was this food freedom. Like some of the noise in my brain kind of went away. When you're eating processed foods, even if they're vegetable based and healthy, they cause you to have cravings all the time. And so that feeling, even low carb, I never felt full. And so to finally get to be full, that was an immediate, amazing thing for me. It was when I got sober 11 years ago, I thought to myself, I wish I could have that with food. And for a long time, carnivore does that for you. Now, if you start dipping too much into the dairy, you have to still work at it. It's not a cure, but it's so much better to get to be full. I started sleeping a lot better pretty quickly. And my sleep isn't perfect. We're still working on the inflammation stuff, but it's so much better. I've gotten more strength in my muscles. I used to not be able to go up and down the stairs. And now I just walked 12 miles before this interview. I used to not be able to drive. This summer, I drove back and forth to Florida with 4 kids by myself. So it's honestly, and it's not just the SIRS stuff. It absolutely is the meat too. I used to have food reactions constantly. Now I can eat some meat at a restaurant without keeling over, even because it might have a little contamination on it. Yeah. I've even had a spice or two here and there and not died. Life has gotten seriously so much better. My skin feels better. I feel younger. It's just been amazing. My skin seems to be shrinking up. My teeth used to be so sensitive all the time. Now I am not the best brusher in the world, which is okay because I'm married. And my teeth, they just feel so strong, and they don't have gunk on them anymore. There's just so many things that I wish I would have known about this before having gastric bypass. Because I'm still, even eating this nutrient dense food, I'm still having nutrient issues.
Wow.
Yeah, you unfortunately, are kind of behind the 8 ball, right? Because your intestines have literally been rearranged. And even though you're eating, the most nutrient dense food we can eat, you're still going to have some issues because you're not absorbing, normally. But I would say it sounds like you've got into your best place. So how long have you been doing carnivore for?
Since January 2023. So we're like almost 2 years.
Gosh, you're not even 2 years into it. Wow.
I hear people saying all the time, this isn't sustainable. This isn't sustainable. I really feel like it is. I actually like the way I eat. Unlike any other way of eating that I've ever tried, I actually like the way I eat. It's so easy as a busy mom to just throw the meat in. It's so easy. The groceries are easy. The ingredients are easy. My cupboards are not full of crud. I feel like I've actually saved money because we never throw food away. If there's leftovers, we throw them in the freezer. The extra fat, I put it in a jar and save it to cook for later. There's just so little waste. And yeah.
I think we've had more than enough experience with our guests and our host to know that carnivore is absolutely sustainable. But it's cool because most of the folks that we've had on the show who practice a fully carnivore or mostly carnivore lifestyle also happen to be healthcare providers of some sort or another. It's nice to have just one of us normal folks who's walked that path. And it sounds frankly like your experience has been far more extreme than almost anyone we've talked with. So how long did it take to have the mental and emotional shift that you're clearly experiencing now? Was that pretty fast as well?
That is a good question. When I started this journey, I was in a home that had quite a bit of water damage. So we had
So
to
you
move
had
out of that
mold.
home. Yes. Then we moved into a camper that got water damage. So now we're
Don't
9
mean to
months into
laugh, but
carnivore, and I'm still heavily exposed to black mold. So once we moved out of there, that's when my brain started to get better, but then my hormones and my thyroid took a tank. And so that was kind of interesting because I had gone lion diet. In the middle of lion diet, my hormones and my thyroid took a tank. Now, was it the lion? No. It was the fact that this place that we're in now has a different type of black mold. So I can use my brain, but it tanked me inside, something that people can't see. So when people are having these symptoms, they have no idea where they're coming from. I live in the most beautiful townhome. This is a beautiful town. You would never guess. It has no scent. It's absolutely gorgeous. But after I saw my functional doctor, he ran my labs and he said, "You're in exposure. I can tell because your inflammation numbers went up and because of this and this." And he said, "You got to test that place." And we tested it. And I was like, "I don't want to know. I don't want to know." And, it's difficult to move. But so the brain part has taken some moving and time, but it was solely because of my exposures that I'm in. So we have air filters running and we're praying on finding a place that doesn't have black mold, but it's so difficult. I live in a very humid place. I'm sure Dr. Ovadia, you can feel that.
Yeah. And, one of the guests we had on, I think, gave us the stat that 80% of the buildings in the country have at least some sort of air quality problem, and mold is certainly a common one. So it is a challenge. And oftentimes, again, the strategy is what can we do to, eliminate some of the other bombardment of the immune system, the other things that are triggering this inflammatory response, such as the foods that we're eating, I would say should be first and foremost there so that your body can better deal with, the other exposures that we have.
Yeah, I think if we didn't strip away the food, I wouldn't have found the other things because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Until you strip that down, then you can start seeing clearly the other things. So a big thing that has made a huge difference, I never thought I'd go down this path, but the food alone wasn't fixing it, is we added some bioidentical progesterone and we added some thyroid medicine per the instructions of my doctor and my lab exams. And that has just totally changed everything as well, to have that support. Ultimately, he says he believes I can get off some of this if I can get out of exposure and we can reduce my inflammation.
Sure.
But in the meantime, having that support has been a game changer.
Yeah, and I think that is an excellent point. And I was discussing this recently on another podcast I was on, just saying that, carnivore is great, but it doesn't fix everything. And oftentimes you do need support. And, there's reasons that we talk about those other pillars of metabolic health besides the food that we're eating. I think most of us would agree that food is first and foremost, But, the other things, sleep, stress, getting out in the sun, and, other environmental issues that can come up can be problematic for some people.
Adrian, I'm wondering how your recovery has affected your husband and your children, and I guess extended family as well, because that's got to have made quite an impact.
Some of my family absolutely rejects this. They don't want anything to do it. They don't post pictures of me. They pretend like I'm not even their family anymore. They think I'm a total alien, and that's fine. But some of my closer family, like even my husband, he has been on blood pressure medicine for 5 years. And I kept telling him, that's insulin resistance, honey. That's insulin resistance. You got to stop eating out so much. You got to clean up your diet. And he's seen me just light up and change. And so even he's dabbled in carnivore. And when he did it, he dabbled out because it's tough. It's a tough switch. He's got to get to that place where he's, okay, this is my thing. But while he was on it, he felt amazing. He stopped needing a nap every day. He had more brain clarity. He was full. He didn't have stomach issues. He has inflamed guts really bad to the point he's even ended up in the hospital for that. And life has never been the same since he tried it. Like he knows one day that's what he's got to do. So he's preparing himself for that. Now, two of my kids definitely have the same inflammation problem I do. And some people would diagnose that. They would say, oh, your kids are autistic. Oh, your kids have ADHD. My kids would be diagnosed. But what I see is inflammation. So we recently took them to my same doctor and had the blood work run. And in fact, they are inflamed just like me. So we need to get out of this place and get into a clean place for them too. Now, as far as meat, I tell them, because I have a 13, 11, 5, and 2. So my 13, 11, they're a little bit tougher. But I tell them, you eat your meat first and you can have the other stuff after. We don't really cook noodles. Wheat is just gone. Gluten is just gone. You eat your meat, you can have the other stuff. Now, my littles have pretty much eaten meat their whole life, and so they're pretty okay with it. My little guy, he thinks that pork rinds are chips because he's not really had real chips. His first food was steak, and he enjoys water. He'll even drink plain electrolyte water and steak. That's what he likes. So it's been great for my little kids because I know it's good for their brain and their development. And I'm excited that we're nipping their inflammation in the bud young and not letting it fester. So I think this has been great for my whole family.
Yeah, I was wondering if, in fact, because they're not getting antagonists in their diet, if their immune system is just simply under less stress all the time anyway, and they maybe handle a stressful external environment better. Phil, am I
Yeah,
making
no, I
sense?
think there's a lot of validity to that, and a lot of reason, to think that may be true. And, we can look at the general experience with COVID and we can see that, the people that tended to get sickest with that and the people that seem to be more susceptible to it to start with were people who were metabolically unhealthy. And part of that, I think, is because of that, when the immune system is constantly under stress, another antagonist, as you said, like a virus, is going to be, you're going to be more susceptible to that. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that to be true. And, I think being able to start children, young on this will have amazing effects on their long term. Those of us who started this as adults, still see amazing effects. But I really, as I hear about more and more children doing this and just seeing how they're developing, it's great. And I think we're gonna see lots of good things coming out of that.
Can I tell you, I have a friend who's a homeschooling mom who lives out in the country, and she homeschooled her 4 kids and she raised them on whole foods. I don't even think they ever had gluten and they never had seed oils. And, some people would argue, they'd say, oh, those kids are going to be so disordered. They're going to gorge themselves when they get access to the good stuff. No, my husband took their 22-year-old out for dinner and said, hey, have some of these French fries. And he did. And he felt like garbage because he actually feels the effect of the food. No, he did not gorge himself. And no, he did not become addicted. he rejected that food because his body actually said, ugh, that's not even food. So I really wish more people would know that story of no, if we raise our kids on healthy foods, they're going to feel the effects of the bad foods. They're not going to become addicted and crazy and disordered.
My wife and I are actually kind of running that experiment. Since starting this show with Phil, we've gotten a whole lot better about what we put in our bodies. And we both had a rough day a couple of days ago and thought, some fish tacos sounds really good. I don't even know if you have fish tacos in Minnesota, but they're a thing here.
Of course we do.
And we ran up the street to the place we always used to get fish tacos, and we got the keto wraps. They make a keto so you're not having the corn tortillas or the wheat tortillas. And within just a couple hours, we both were like, yeah, that was just not worth it. And we were commenting to each other, this didn't used to affect us this way. And I was speculating that maybe because we've kind of raised the bar on the quality of the food that we eat, that we have actually become not necessarily more sensitive, but simply more conscious of how crappy we feel when we eat crappy food. We used to just be used to feeling crappy. Feeling crappy was normal.
Yeah, I think that's the sad reality for most people, that they don't realize that they feel crappy all the time because that has become the norm. And when you finally get out of that, and then something puts you back to that, I think you certainly notice it.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian, this is such an extraordinary story. I know you realize it is. Thank you for sharing it with us. Typically, our guests have some sort of public presence. Many of them are healthcare providers and offer help to people. I know you've got social media. Is that something folks might want to check out?
Sure. I started a YouTube channel. It's Adrian K. Gledhill. Some call me the biggest loser carnivore. And I've been interviewing different people who inspire me, but I've also started interviewing different Biggest Loser alumni. I want to hear, how did it go for you guys?
Yeah, I think you've got gold there with that particular approach.
It's been a little difficult to get people to come, but now that they're seeing their friends doing it, now I've got people saying, hey, can I come on your show? So that's one of the things I'm doing. And then I'm just on Instagram and I share stories every day of what is life like doing this? Like we walk, we lift, we eat meat. Here's what I'm feeding my kids. Here's what I'm grocery shopping for. This is just life. And it's not that hard. It's really not.
Having a mom with kids at home saying, I'm doing this, it's working, is going to help a lot of those moms with kids at home who are thinking all these healthcare providers can do it, but I don't know that I can. So thank you. I'm really grateful that you've shared your story with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We'll make sure that the links to your YouTube channel and social media show up in the show notes. Phil, any last words before we call it a day?
No, this has just been such a great conversation. I was fortunate to meet Adrian at a conference a few months ago and just loved her story, knew we had to get it out there. And it just, like I said, a lot of people like myself think we've done everything we, can to lose weight, but there are some, always other steps to take. And just hearing all that she went through and then just the contrast with, what Carnivore has done, I hope will really inspire some people out there. And I know it's already had great effects on people, and happy to just help to be able to spread this message.
We appreciate it, folks. Thanks for listening. Want to do something a little bit new here. If you've got questions you wish we'd asked Adrian, you can go on our podcast, and there's a way to talk back to us via email. Go ahead and do that. If there's folks that you think we should be talking to that we hadn't talked to, you can do that as well. And I think that'll do it for today. Adrian, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
For Dr. Philip Ovadia, this has been the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to talking to you next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.